Commander Park Jimin stood on the bridge of his stealth destroyer as it emerged from a hidden launch bay deep inside an asteroid. The ship had been built using technology that most of the galaxy believed was impossible. Metamaterials in the hull, bent light and sensor waves around the vessel, making it completely invisible. The Vakari fleet was still approaching Earth in their standard attack formation. They had no idea that human ships were already moving through their ranks like ghosts. The aliens had never encountered true stealth technology, and their confusion was obvious as targets appeared and disappeared on their screens. Captain Lee Soyan piloted her ship between two massive alien vessels. The enemy crews could not see her, even though she was close enough to touch their hulls. Her weapons were charging, but she was waiting for the coordinated strike that would begin the real war. Major Kang Minho was in the command center on Luna, watching as railgun platforms hidden in craters across the moon prepared to fire. These weapons had been developed during humanity's expansion wars, but they had never been used against an alien species. The railguns could accelerate projectiles to 20% of light speed. The solid metal slugs would hit their targets with more energy than most alien weapons could produce in hours of continuous fire. The Vakari shields were designed for energy beams, not kinetic impacts. Dr. No Hyejin monitored the targeting systems as they locked onto enemy vessels. The computers were calculating trajectories that would send projectiles across millions of kilometers of space to hit moving targets with perfect accuracy. This was technology that other species thought was impossible. Lieutenant Song Woo-jin led his squadron of fighter craft toward the alien formation. His ships were equipped with weapons that violated several treaties that humanity had never actually signed. The technology had been developed in secret facilities that did not officially exist. The fighters moved with precision that seemed impossible to outside observers. They were guided by artificial intelligence systems that could process information faster than any biological brain. These computers had been banned by most galactic civilizations, but humans had built them anyway. Admiral Jayanarium was coordinating the first phase of the attack from her flagship. She had been waiting for this moment for decades. All of the planning and preparation and hidden development was finally going to be put to the test. The human fleet had been designed to fight a completely different kind of war than what the aliens expected. Instead of meeting enemy ships in direct combat, they would strike from stealth and disappear before the enemy could respond. Captain Nam Subin received the signal to begin the attack. Her ship dropped out of stealth mode just long enough to fire a full salvo of missiles, then vanished again before the aliens could target her. The enemy crews were panicking as weapons appeared from empty space. The first railgun projectiles reached their targets moving so fast that the alien ships had no time to react. The solid metal slugs punched through shields and armor like they were not there. Each impact released enough energy to vaporize everything for hundreds of meters around. Commander Yun Taeyang watched as alien vessels began to break apart under the kinetic assault. The Vakari had been expecting energy weapon exchanges and boarding actions. They had not prepared for relativistic projectiles that could destroy their ships in single hits. The stealth ships were striking throughout the alien formation. Enemy commanders were trying to coordinate their response, but they could not target vessels. They could not see. Human ships would appear just long enough to fire, then disappear back into invisibility. Lieutenant Kim Dae was piloting one of the new fighter craft that incorporated technology the aliens had never seen. The ship could change direction without following normal physics. Its weapons could penetrate any known type of armor. The pilot interface was connected directly to his nervous system. The genetic modifications in the human pilots were allowing them to react faster than alien computer systems. They could process battlefield information and make decisions in microseconds. Their enhanced reflexes made them impossible for enemy weapons to track. Colonel Bei Minji was coordinating boarding. Parties equipped with personal weapons that were considered war crimes by most civilized species. The soldiers themselves had undergone genetic modifications that let them survive in conditions that would kill normal beings. The enhanced humans could fight in vacuum without protective suits. They could regenerate from injuries that would be fatal to other species. Their strength and speed were beyond what any alien warrior could match. They moved through enemy ships like unstoppable forces of nature. The aliens were beginning to realize that they had not attacked a weak species, but had instead awakened something that had been deliberately restraining itself. The humans were not fighting like any other race the Vakari had encountered. They were using tactics and weapons that seemed to come from another universe entirely. The first phase of the battle was lasting only minutes, but already the alien fleet was in chaos. Their formation was breaking apart as ships tried to avoid weapons. They could not see or defend against the Vakari, had never experienced anything like this in their centuries of conquest. General Kim Myong watched the battle displays from the Strategic Command Center as the true scale of human preparation became visible. The Vakari fleet that had seemed so overwhelming just hours before was now fighting for its survival against an enemy that refused to follow any known patterns of warfare. The alien commanders were trying to adapt their tactics, but every strategy they attempted was countered by human forces that seemed to know exactly what they were going to do. This was because humans had spent decades studying every species the Vakari had conquered. Colonel Bei Minji was coordinating the deployment of enhanced soldiers who had undergone genetic modifications that most of the galaxy would consider impossible. These warriors could survive direct exposure to vacuum, and their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill any other species. The modified humans could process information at speeds that let them think faster than alien computer systems. Their reflexes were so quick that they could dodge energy beams after they had been fired. They were no longer entirely human, but something new and terrifying. Captain Yu Dong-yun led boarding parties equipped with personal weapons that had been banned from civilized warfare. These tools could cut through any known material or disable any type of technology. They had been developed specifically to fight against superior alien forces. The humans had learned from every defeat that other species had suffered against. The Vakari. They knew exactly which tactics would fail and which technologies would be useless. They had prepared countermeasures for every alien weapon and strategy. Dr. Seo Jisu was running psychological warfare operations that were having devastating effects on enemy morale. Human broadcasts were reaching Vakari ships, showing them recordings of what had happened to the last alien species that had tried to conquer humanity. The aliens were beginning to understand that they had not attacked a peaceful civilization. They had awakened a species that had voluntarily restrained itself to avoid becoming the monsters they were now revealing themselves to be. The humans had been holding back their true nature. Major Huang Seojin was receiving reports from human colonies throughout the galaxy as they simultaneously revealed their true military capabilities. Mining worlds were uncovering weapons platforms that had been hidden for centuries. Research stations were deploying technology that could destroy entire fleets. The Vakari had divided their forces to attack multiple human settlements, expecting easy victories against isolated colonies. But now they found themselves facing coordinated resistance from worlds that seemed to have been preparing for this exact situation. Every human world was connected by communication networks that the aliens had never detected. Commands could be sent across the galaxy in minutes, allowing perfect coordination between distant battles. The humans were fighting as a single organism with millions of parts. Commander Cho Young-ho confirmed that human fleets had successfully surrounded the main Vakari task force using faster-than-light technology that had been purely theoretical until this moment. The aliens were trapped in normal space, unable to retreat. The FTL interdiction fields were preventing any alien ship from jumping to hyperspace. This was technology that most species believed was impossible, but humans had been working on it in secret for over a century. The Vakari fleet was completely cut off from reinforcement or escape. Captain Jung-soon was coordinating the systematic destruction of alien vessels as human forces demonstrated weapons that seemed to violate The basic laws of physics: energy beams that could penetrate any shield, projectiles that could change direction in flight, explosives that could destroy matter at the atomic level. The aliens were discovering that human technology was not just more advanced than they had thought. It was based on completely different principles that made their own weapons and defenses useless. Nothing in their experience had prepared them for this kind of warfare. Lieutenant Colonel Nam Subin watched as human. Reinforcements continued to arrive from directions that should have been impossible. Ships were appearing in the battle zone without using any known form of faster-than-light travel. They seemed to be stepping between dimensions. The humans had developed transportation technology that could move fleets across the galaxy in seconds without using hyperspace. This gave them an overwhelming advantage because they could concentrate forces anywhere they were needed faster than any enemy could respond. Admiral Ansuman was aboard the command ship as she received surrender requests from multiple Vakari commanders. The alien fleet was being destroyed so quickly that many ships were trying to give up before they were targeted. The battle was becoming a massacre. The other alien civilizations that had been monitoring the conflict were now reconsidering their own positions toward humanity. They had expected to divide human territory among themselves after the Vakari victory. But now they were seeing what happened to species that threatened human survival. The tide of battle had not just turned. It had become a tsunami that was washing away everything the aliens thought they knew about warfare. The humans were not just winning. They were demonstrating that they were the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Ko Sung stood in the war room deep beneath the surface of the moon. The chamber was carved out of solid rock and protected by layers of armor that could stop almost any weapon. The walls were covered with displays showing the true extent of human military power. For the first time in over 2 centuries, the complete picture of human defense capabilities was visible on the screens. The Vakari had made a critical mistake in their intelligence gathering. They had assumed that what they could observe represented everything humanity possessed. The aliens had spent months watching human colonies and tracking supply ships. They had monitored communications and mapped defense installations. They thought they understood human military strength. But they had been looking at less than 10% of what really existed. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Boyong was coordinating with sleeper cells that had been hidden throughout human space for generations. These were not spies or secret agents. These were ordinary citizens who carried genetic modifications that would only activate during wartime. The human population was not just civilians waiting to be conquered. Every person on every human world was a potential soldier. Each one had been born with dormant enhancements built into their DNA. These changes would transform them into something no alien species had ever encountered. Dr. Yang Yunbi was overseeing the activation of the distributed manufacturing network, hidden throughout. Every human settlement were factories that could produce military equipment from civilian infrastructure. Within hours, peaceful colonies could become fortress worlds. Every human habitat had been designed with this possibility in mind. Shopping centers could be converted into weapons factories. Apartment buildings could become military barracks. Farms could start producing chemical compounds needed for explosives. The transformation was happening everywhere at once. Captain Im Jae-hyun was receiving reports from mining operations in the outer system. As the facilities revealed their true purpose, alien observers finally understood what they were really seeing. These were not just asteroid processing plants. These were weapons platforms that had been disguised for decades. The humans had learned from studying the species that the Vakari had already conquered. Every one of those civilizations had fallen because they kept their military forces in obvious locations. When the aliens destroyed the government centers and army bases, the war was over. But humanity had taken a different approach. There was no central command that could be destroyed to stop their war effort. No single planet that controlled their military forces. Every world could operate independently, and every citizen could fight. Colonel Oh So-young watched as the activation cascade spread across human space. Each world was revealing defenses that had been completely invisible to alien reconnaissance. The process was automatic and unstoppable. Once it had begun, hidden factories were starting production of weapons that had been designed centuries ago, but never built fighter craft that existed only as blueprints were rolling off assembly lines that had been disguised as civilian manufacturing plants. The genetic modifications were becoming active in millions of humans at the same time. People who had been shopkeepers and teachers and farmers were discovering that they could run faster than any alien soldier. They could think more clearly than alien commanders. They could see in the dark and survive in vacuum captain. Lee So-yeon was one of the first to experience the full activation. Her body was changing in ways that felt strange but also natural. Her muscles were becoming denser. Her bones were getting stronger. Her nervous system was processing information at incredible speed. She realized that she had always been more than human, but the modifications had been sleeping inside her until now. Every human carried the potential to become something that could fight against any alien threat. The Vakari had no idea what they were really facing. Major Kang Minho was coordinating ground-based weapons that were emerging from their hiding places. Railgun. Platforms built inside lunar craters were opening fire for the first time in 2 centuries. These weapons could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The Vakari shields had been designed to stop energy weapons, but they were useless against solid objects moving at relativistic velocities. The alien ships had no defense against kinetic projectiles that could punch through their hulls like they were made of paper. Dr. No Hyejin was monitoring the battle from the command center. She was watching technology that had been theoretical for centuries prove devastatingly effective in actual combat. The humans had been preparing for this war while hoping it would never come. The aliens had based their entire invasion plan on what they could observe about human military capability. They had never realized that humanity was deliberately showing only their weakest weapons to the galaxy. Everything else had been hidden until this moment. The revelation was spreading through the Vakari fleet as they began to understand what they were really fighting. Their sensors were detecting human military assets that had not existed moments before, weapons that violated every assumption they had made about human technology. Dr. Choi Hana walked through the underground tunnels beneath the city of Geneva. The corridors were long and dark, and they went deeper into the earth than most people knew existed. She had been working in the archives above, but now she was going to a place that was supposed to stay locked forever. Her colleague, Dr. Bae Junho, was walking beside her. Both of them had special security clearances that let them into areas where normal people could never go. They were 2 of only 12 humans in the galaxy who knew what Project Lazarus really was. The tunnels led to a massive underground complex that stretched for many kilometers in every direction. The rooms were filled with machines and computers and weapons that had been sealed away. For over 200 years, everything was covered in dust, and the air smelled old and stale. But now the ancient systems were coming back to life. Lights were turning on for the first time in centuries. Computers were starting to run again. The whole facility was waking up like a giant creature that had been sleeping for a very long time. Dr. Choi Hana typed her access codes into a control panel. The screen showed green lights as the system accepted her identity. She was one of the few people alive who had the authority to activate these machines. Her hands were shaking because she knew what this meant. The humans had learned terrible lessons during their early years in space. When they first started exploring other worlds, they had developed weapons and tactics that were so dangerous, they scared themselves. The technology was so powerful that humanity decided to lock it all away. Every human colony had buildings like this one. Hidden beneath government offices and military bases were secret facilities filled with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. These vaults existed on every world that humans had settled, but most people did not know about them. Commander Yoon Tae-yang was in the command center on Luna when his computer started showing new signals. 312 separate locations across human space were reporting that their hidden facilities were powering up. Each one was responding to special codes that only the highest commanders possessed. The aliens had studied human military forces for months before attacking. They thought they understood what humanity could do in a war. They had watched human ships and counted human weapons. They believed they knew exactly how strong the human defense would be, but the Vakari had never discovered the shadow network that connected every human world. They had no idea that what they could see was only a small part of human military capability. The real weapons had been hidden so well that alien spies could live on human worlds for years without finding them. Captain Nam Subin was on her ship when her tactical displays started showing new contacts all around the solar system. Defense platforms that had been invisible were suddenly appearing on her. Sensors. These were not the military stations that everyone knew about. These were the secret ones. The hidden weapons had been disguised as asteroids and space debris for decades. Some of them were built inside real asteroids and others were covered. With fake rock to fool enemy sensors, the Vakari had flown right past them without knowing they were there. Each defense platform had enough firepower to destroy a dozen enemy ships. They had been waiting in the darkness for over 2 centuries, hoping they would never be needed. But now the time had come to use them against an enemy that threatened all of humanity. Dr. Yang Yunbi was coordinating the activation from her position in the command bunker. She watched as status reports came in from hidden facilities across known space. Each one was following the same protocol that had been planned long ago. The process was automatic once it started. The authentication codes from human command had triggered systems that were designed to activate without any human control. This was done on purpose so that even if the aliens captured human commanders, the weapons would still wake up. Lieutenant Song Woo-jin was piloting his fighter when he received new orders. His ship was equipped with weapons that most of the galaxy thought were just theories. The technology had been developed in secret and tested in hidden locations, far from alien observation. The humans had been very careful during their expansion into space. They had learned that showing your full strength was a mistake. It was better to appear weak while you prepared for the worst possible situation. The Vakari thought they were attacking a peaceful species, but they were actually facing the most dangerous military force in the galaxy all across human space. Ordinary people were getting emergency messages telling them to report to locations they had never heard of. Citizens who worked normal jobs discovered that they had been selected for special training years ago. Training that would activate only in a time of war. The genetic modifications were starting to work. People who had lived their whole lives as regular humans were beginning to change. Their bodies were becoming stronger and faster. Their minds were processing information more quickly. These changes had been built into their DNA but hidden until now. Colonel Shin Bo-young was watching the transformation begin. Millions of human civilians were becoming soldiers in a matter of hours. Each one carried dormant enhancements that would make them more effective in combat than any alien warrior. The aliens had planned to conquer humanity by destroying their government and military centers. But humans had learned from the mistakes of other species. There was no single point that could be attacked to cripple their war effort. Every world could fight independently, and every citizen could become a weapon. The awakening was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Systems that had been sleeping for centuries were coming online in minutes. The humans had spent 200 years preparing for this exact situation, and now all of their planning was about to be tested. Captain Lee Hyun stood on the bridge of his warship and looked out at space. He could see thousands of alien ships coming toward Earth. The ships were big and shiny like metal needles floating in the dark. The alien fleet had more than 3,000 vessels, and they all looked ready for war. Admiral Park Minji was talking to all the human ships through the radio. Her voice was calm, but everyone knew they were in big trouble. The aliens called themselves the Vakari Empire, and they had already taken over 47 different worlds in the past 100 years. Every time they attacked a planet, the fight was over in just a few days. The Vakari commander sent a message to the humans. He spoke through a machine that changed his alien words into human language. His voice sounded mean and full of pride. He told the humans they had one last chance to give up without fighting. If humans surrendered now, they could become slaves like all the other species the Vakari had beaten. Lieutenant Kim Day whispered to his crew that every human ship was badly outnumbered. There were almost 10 alien ships for every human vessel. The alien weapons were stronger, and their ships were bigger. The Vakari had energy beams that could cut through human ship armor like it was made of paper. The aliens thought humans were weak and stupid. They said humans had barely learned how to travel between the stars. The Vakari commander laughed when he talked about human technology. He called humans soft, creatures who would break easily in a real war. He said the Vakari had never lost a battle, and they were not going to start losing now. But something strange happened in the middle of the alien threat. Human command had been quiet for over an hour. This was unusual because the commanders always talked to their ships during battles. Every captain and admiral was waiting for orders, but the radio stayed silent. Then exactly 63 minutes after the last message, something changed. Every human radio in space started receiving the same transmission. It came from the highest level of human command, the people who made all the important decisions for their species. Admiral Park Minji read the message out loud so everyone could hear it. Her voice carried to every human ship and every space station and every colony across the solar system. The message was short and simple, but it made everyone who heard it feel cold inside. The message said, "Since you chose war, let us show you how it's done." Those words were broadcast to every human military unit and every civilian settlement. They reached the mining stations in the asteroid belt and the research bases on the outer planets. Even the secret facilities that most people did not know existed received the transmission. Captain Lee Hyun felt his hands shake when he heard those words. He knew what they meant, even though he had never heard them before. Every human commander understood that something big was about to happen. The aliens had forced humanity to make a choice, and now they were going to see the results. The Vakari ships kept coming closer to Earth. They had no idea what the human message meant. They thought it was just empty words from a weak species trying to sound brave. The alien commanders were already planning how they would divide up human territory after their easy victory. But deep in the human command centers, alarms were going off. Systems that had been sleeping for hundreds of years were waking up. Computers that had not run for centuries were starting to work again. People who had normal jobs were getting emergency messages telling them to report to secret locations. Dr. Choi Hana was working in an underground building when her computer screen flashed red. She had been studying old books, but now she had to put on her military uniform and go to a place she had hoped never to visit. Her hands were shaking as she typed her access codes into the security system. The message from Human Command was spreading across space faster than the alien ships could travel. It reached colonies that were light years away from Earth. Within hours, every human settlement in the galaxy had received the same transmission. Since you chose war, let us show you how. It's done. Lieutenant Colonel Nam Subin was on a mining station when the message arrived. She looked at her crew and saw the same expression on every face. They all knew that their peaceful lives were about to end. The aliens had made a terrible mistake by threatening humanity. The Vakari fleet was getting closer to the human defense line. Their sensors showed them exactly what they expected to see. Some human warships that were smaller and weaker than their own vessels. A few space stations with basic weapons. Nothing that could stop a proper military force. But the aliens could not see everything. Their sensors were good, but they were not perfect. Hidden beneath the surface of every human world were things that had been built long ago, and then locked away. Things that humanity had promised never to use again unless they had no other choice. Captain Yun Taiyang checked his instruments and saw lights turning on all over the solar system. These were not the normal lights of cities and space stations. These were the lights of weapons that had been sleeping in the dark for 200 years. The human message kept repeating on every frequency. Since you chose war, let us show you how it's done. It was becoming clear that these were not just words. This was a promise the aliens had demanded war, and now they were going to get exactly what they had asked for. Fleet Admiral An Suman walked through the corridors of the captured Vakari flagship as alien crew members knelt in surrender. The massive vessel that had been the pride of their empire was now a human prize taken in battle. The war that was supposed to last months had been decided in less than 24 hours. The Vakari commander stood before her in chains that had been forged from the wreckage of his own escort ships. His proud bearing was gone, and his eyes showed the shock of complete defeat. He formally surrendered not just his fleet, but his entire empire's claim to human space. Dr. Lim Tae-hyung was leading teams of scientists through the captured alien vessels, examining their technology with professional interest. The Vakari equipment was impressively advanced, but ultimately limited by their species' inability to think beyond conventional warfare. The aliens had built weapons and ships that were very good at fighting the kind of wars they had always fought, but they had no conception of the kind of total warfare that humans had been preparing for. They had never imagined that an entire species could be transformed into a military force. Captain Jung-soon was coordinating with human settlements across the galaxy as they began the process of revealing their true nature to their alien neighbors. The masquerade was over, and humanity was showing the galaxy what they had always been capable of. The message from human command had been prophetic when forced. To choose war, humanity had indeed shown the galaxy how it was done. The demonstration had been so complete that no other species would ever again mistake human restraint for weakness. Colonel Han Meek-young was establishing new security protocols. As human space expanded to include former Vakari territories, worlds that had been enslaved by the aliens were now free under human protection. The liberation had taken less than a day. The humans had proven that they were not conquerors by choice. But when pushed to violence, they were more effective at it than any species the galaxy had yet produced. Their preference for peace was genuine, but their capability for war was absolute. Ambassador Park Seo-young was beginning negotiations with representatives from other major galactic powers. The discussions were very different from what anyone had expected before the war. Human diplomats were no longer asking for acceptance. They were dictating terms. The other species were learning that humanity preferred cooperation but was fully prepared to defend itself and its allies against any future aggression. The galaxy had discovered that there was a difference between a peaceful species and a weak one. The transformation was spreading. Beyond military applications, human colonies were revealing technologies that had been hidden in civilian infrastructure. Faster than light communication networks connected every world. Medical facilities could repair injuries that had been considered fatal. Dr. Choi Hana was overseeing the integration of military technology into civilian life. The genetic modifications that had created super soldiers could also be used to help normal humans adapt to hostile environments. The weapons that had won the war could be converted to tools for building new worlds. Captain Lee Hyun stood on the bridge of his ship as it patrolled the space around Earth. The view was very different from just days before alien vessels were arriving, not as conquerors, but as supplicants seeking to establish diplomatic relations with the new galactic power. The Vakari had been the strongest military force in known space, but they had lasted less than 1 day against human forces that had been holding back for centuries. Other species were quickly calculating what this meant for their own relationships with humanity. Lieutenant Song Woo-jin was training new pilots in the advanced fighter craft that were no longer secret. The technology that had been hidden was now being mass-produced. Human military forces were growing stronger every day as more people underwent the enhancement process. The galaxy was entering a new era where humanity's position was no longer in question. The species that had seemed weakest when they first ventured into space had revealed themselves to be the most formidable force any civilization had encountered. The last message from human command had become the first message of this new age. Since you chose, war, let us show you how it's done. Those words were now carved into monuments on every human world, reminding everyone of the day their species had proven itself. The other civilizations would learn to coexist peacefully with their new neighbors, or they would discover what the Vakari had learned too late: that humanity had spent centuries hoping for peace, but preparing for war, and when war came, they were very, very good at it.